are you looking at buying a private jet inside your limited company? Here's some reasons why that's a good idea, but also can be a bad idea. So the first question is that private jet a tax-deductible expense in a UK company? Now, is one of those typical tax questions, right? Where it's a yes and a no, obviously not straight up one way or the other. Yes, it is, in a sense of, as long as that asset, that purchase of the jet and the usage of that jet is 100% business, then we can claim that as a business asset. We can therefore claim deductions on it, the operational running, etc., etc. However, HMRC, as you can imagine, scrutinize these things very, very, very tough. So what we need to remember is that any personal usage of that private jet is going to incur benefit in kind, which will be taxed probably if you're a private jet owner at 45% plus national insurance on that commercial value of the jet that you are chartering. So, for example, I own a private jet and I go from London to Miami, and a normal London to Miami trip is $100,000. I will be taxed as an individual 45% plus 13.8% national insurance on the equivalent, so the 100,000 benefit that I've received by going on holiday to Miami. So as I said, HMRC scrutinizes this quite heavily. So you need to make sure you've got your ducks in a row. And look, let's be honest, if you're in a private jet, the chances of you then jumping on a commercial plane on holiday somewhere is quite unlikely, right? So therefore, we do need to think about this more practically. One kind of, I guess, additional point, maybe a bit boring, but and technical, but a lot of business assets receive the annual investment allowance, which is an annual allowance that businesses can use to write off a certain amount of business assets that they've purchased 100% in the first year. With private jets, they are not allowed to be under that regime. So therefore, they would fall automatically in the general pool. So they would be written off at 18% per year for tax purposes. So again, you spend 100 million on a jet, 18% of that is going to be deducted in year one, not that 100 million. So that's another important note to have in your mind as well. So maybe let's give some examples. What's business? What's personal? May sound obvious, but let's just run through them. So business, flying to see suppliers, flying for board meetings, attending investor meetings, maybe flying to see different premises. So let's say you've got an office in the UK, in France, and in Spain. Flying to those different offices would also be deemed to be business use. But what would be personal use? Flying you and your spouse or your family somewhere for not business purposes, that would be not business use. Your spouse using the jet on her own without you, that could also be deemed as personal use if she's not in the business and therefore not using it for business purposes. But also combining, some people, think, if I do a meeting, if I go to the south of France and I do a meeting while I'm in the south of France, then I can go on holiday after that and I can expense it. No, it doesn't work like that. They've clocked onto that. That doesn't work. And then the next piece is VAT. If you have any element of personal use within that jet, then it will be disallowed pretty much completely for VAT reclaim. So therefore, you buy something of a significant value and you've got a VAT, at 20% on that, you want to be able to reclaim as much of that as possible. In the UK, you will struggle to do that because, like I said, most people that own a jet are likely to use it for personal purposes as well. Because like I said, most people in the UK are likely to use it for personal circumstances as well, unless you're lucky enough to own 3 or 4 and you can dedicate one to personal use. The only way to avoid the benefit in kind as a tax benefit, if you like, is that if you were to reimburse the company the money that for that portion. So if you were to 100,000 was the flight, if you were to give the company that 100,000 personally, then that would negate the benefit and therefore no benefit in kind. But most people, again, they're not going to be doing that. So how can we structure this better? So there's a few different jurisdictions that work well. Isle of Man is one, Malta's another, but also the UAE is another jurisdiction that works well. But if you are looking at those jurisdictions, again, we've got to look at the reason for it. So we can't just have an entity in Isle of Man own a jet and then you use it 100% of the time. That still doesn't quite work. So do we set up a leasing business? And I'm sure you've got friends or colleagues that may need to use the jet. You can lease it out to them. You can lease it to your own company and then deduct it because you're just paying for the usage. You could then use it personally through that entity. And then at that point, you could pay that entity the money rather than the UK company that's trading. But also, if you use somewhere like the Isle of Man, it's a crown dependency. It's in a customs union with the UK for VAT purposes. So it's actually possible in some circumstances to claim the VAT back on that jet. So again, the Isle of Man could be a very good jurisdiction if you are looking to claim back the VAT. The other thing is, because of the locality within Europe and having it registered and situated in Europe, a lot of Middle East owners of jets are now basing their jets in Isle of Man, in Malta, etc. as well. So that's some of the reasons why you would look at, if you like, an offshore entity to manage the leasing and operations of that jet that you've purchased. So I think, to summarize, the practical reality here is that, in this current day and age, HMRC are scrutinizing, and other tax authorities around the world, but they're scrutinizing things like, high value asset ownership, such as private jets, and making sure that those are taxed properly. People aren't flouting the rules. So if you own a jet inside a UK limited company, you do really need to think about the practicalities of that, how you're using it, how you're managing it, and ultimately how you're going to be taxed. Because if they come knocking, the repercussions based on the value of that asset could be quite high. So drop any of us a line. We can help you out on those structures and planning. And as always, like, subscribe, and share this video with any friends that you think might benefit from it.